you have sort of a very personal connection to this, in that the way that the film was discovered was that your mother stumbled upon it on your behalf, and also there is a sort of slight personal connection in the sense that your mother is Australian and your father is English, and there's something of the same dynamic between them as we find in the film itself. Perhaps you could combine those two into one long and very articulate answer.
Well, the only reason I came upon this material is because I happen to be half Australian, half English, and living in London. My Australian mother was invited late 2007 by some Australian friends to make up a token Aussie audience in a tiny fringe theatre play reading of an unproduced, unrehearsed play called The King's Speech. Now, she's never been invited to a play reading in her entire life. She almost didn't go because it didn't exactly sound very promising. But thank God she did, because she came home, rang me up and said, "You're not going to believe this, but I think I have found your next film." And the moral of the story is, listen to your mother. But the reason the material really spoke to me was not because I have any connection whatsoever to the royal subject matter, but because, as the son of an English father and Australian mother, one of the narratives of my childhood was my mother unpacking the effects of my own father's childhood. My father lost his dad in the war at the age of 2. My grandfather was a bomber navigator, killed in 1942 at the tender age of 30. And in fact, I dedicate the film in his memory. And as a result, my dad was packed off to full-time boarding school at the age of 5, and it was that era of cold baths, even in the middle of winter, outside loos with no doors, corporal punishment, all those great British educational innovations. My mum was brilliant at saying, with the kind of Australian freedom to challenging the English orthodox way, she was brilliant at saying, this obviously would have affected your dad, and it's up to us as a family to unpack those effects. And I went from having a father who was not amazingly connected, to now a dad who says, you're one of my ribs, and that's really thanks to my mum. So my mum is kind of like in a much milder way, obviously, but she's like a Lionel Logue figure to my father in our family.
Yeah. Colin, we're going to cut straight to the question of the stammer, because I know that question would come up from the audience even if I didn't ask it. But the thing that, in reading your comments about playing the role, that interested me the most was that, in a strange kind of way, people seem to fasten on the idea of the stammer and playing the stammer as some kind of trick. But you wanted to get a little bit beyond that, and it struck me that one of the things that happens when he's approaching the words that he can't quite get out is that he is engulfed by this silence. There's a weird way in which he seems to live in fear of those kind of being swallowed up by those silences, and you get something going, actually sometimes even in your neck. There's almost like a muscular thing where he's trying to sort of pull himself back from the brink there. Can you just say a little bit about that?
It was the accompanying fear and his means of tackling it that I found most interesting about it. I mean, we can focus all we like on what happens technically to a person who's stammering, and I think that is of interest. And but I don't think it's necessarily A, helpful to the person who stammers, and B, necessarily helpful dramatically for our story. What we need to understand is who this man is, and we judge that according to how he negotiates his obstacles. And in this case, the stammer was obviously, it loomed very large, but it's how it informed everything else in his approach to life. I think that all the descriptions we have of George VI as a young man, as Prince Bertie, as a timid, retiring, apologetic, a lot of people would judge dim-witted young boy, which are completely, just completely wrong. I mean, if you study him with any depth and look at what he wrote and what he said, there was nothing at all wrong with the fluency of his mind. These all were things that quite clearly radiated out from the stammer. You can get into a chicken and egg argument over, where the stammer came from. But those are the things that interested me. I mean, how the stammer sounded and what was actually happening in his mouth or his throat, that could only be the result of something. And so I think there were two very key things that struck me in terms of being helped. because first you have to help to stammer, someone has to help you stammer in order for you to then try not to stammer. And there are a lot of people who try to help people not to stammer, but there isn't an industry there to help people stammer. And
you could start one.
if anybody wants, I can have you stammering in a month. Absolutely. I certainly had the whole crew stammering.
Yeah. No, it was contagious, actually, having said that. Once he started, it was like the whole rest. I mean,
well, it shut her up for a while.
Anyway, the thing is, it didn't shut him up. The only reason I knew that we were filming was suddenly he stopped talking. It was like, oh, we must be on, and Colin stopped talking. He had to
was interrupted for 5 minutes.
He actually had to overcome a compulsive talking.
Oh, there we go.
He's non-stop.
It is. Sorry, you're interrupting me. But David Seidler did say...
it's actually not one of
David Seidler, the writer.
Yeah, David was... he described it as being underwater. And that was very helpful. And the other thing was Tom and I watched a piece of footage of George VI in a state of complete block, giving a speech rather like the one you see in the beginning of the film here, where his jaw and his neck was clearly working, but it was something very readable, his vulnerability in that moment. And so that was all information that helped me do something which only one can do. It's just a journey of the imagination, really.
He's done stammers before. I just thought I'd add that. But you did a tumble down stammer, didn't you?
No, there was no stammer in Tumble Down. I did a film called Month of the Country.
Oh, no, Month of the Country, sorry.
Which is, there was a First World War veteran, and there was a play called 3 Days of Rain. And so, but they tend not to be a one-size-fits-all.
He doesn't really know. Oh, stammerer.
Get my stammer out of the drawer.
Yeah, it's like me and Queen, the Red Queen and the Queen. Oh, yeah, okay. Same choices.
I think I'll just let you carry on, really. I mean, I hardly know why I bothered to turn up. Claire, if I can try and bring some order to this proceedings. We take, in a strange kind of way, the royal family appears, at least, to be more accessible to us these days. They're kind of... There's almost like a sort of little soap opera now around the royal family. But at the time that this film is set, and this is made clear in the film, the royal family was locked away, really, basically, and until these newfangled things like the radio came along, nobody really knew who they were. They just, as they say, you just had looking good in uniform, not fall off a horse. That left you with not a lot to go on in preparing for your role in Queen Mary, but I know that Tom is an avid researcher. How did you then go about developing the role without access to that kind of material you might have now?
I didn't have a great deal of time, quite honestly. I went straight to YouTube, that great institution, and there was a very short footage of Queen Mary speaking. I was actually interested in how people spoke then, as opposed to the way the Queen, for example, spoke when she was young. Queen Mary did not speak in that very, very, very crisp little voice at all. She spoke as we do, much more open vowels and open... That's just a basic thing. The other thing is, that's mentioned in the film, the tragedy of her son, John, which I feel must have affected the epileptic prince who was hidden away because, of course, the royal family couldn't have a disadvantaged kid. So it simply made me understand that she wasn't this rigid, figure, and I had met Queen Mary, if you can call it that. I was presented to her in a box in a play that I was doing when I was 18, and I just remember this figure with certainly a wig, grey wig, and a wonderful, huge, these are a joke, huge diamond earrings. But again, it was as though she was a picture on the wall. It was not a human being I met at all. But somewhere underneath there had to have been a woman. And I think that woman had suffered a great deal. If I were married to George V, I would have suffered a great deal. If he was a martinet with his sons, he must have been a nightmare with his wife. And I think those marriages at that time were, she was a princess of Teck, which I think is Germany, is it? Not sure. Anyway, I mean, yes, they were marriages of not convenience, but political. What's the word?
Political.
Yeah, political marriages. So I doubt there was any love. There obviously was towards the end, because I think if you live with someone for 60 years, or whatever it was, you eventually get fond of them and even their peculiarities. And she did have, you know, sons, wonderful sons, and a daughter. We know little about her, frankly, and one had to make up the fact that she was a woman who was forced into that incredibly rigid position, and we know nobody can be that. So what else was she? A woman who had suffered, and that I can do.
Let's not get into that now, because we've only got 45. Helena, the last time we saw you play a queen in Alice in Wonderland, you had a somewhat enlarged head and a somewhat extravagant personality, shall we say. I think I'm right in saying you were working on Harry Potter, playing Bellatrix as well, weren't you, when the call came for this? So then you had to modulate yourself down a few notches to play
I thought
this
it would be
character.
good for me, yeah. No, I was doing Harry Potter, which is during the week, and then Tom said, would you mind playing the Queen Mother on the weekends? I said, yeah, sure, I only have 2 children, they went and see me in their mind, whatever. Yeah, no, I never saw you. I never actually. I actually never said yes to him. That's the peculiar thing. He kept on sort of asking and asking, and I just wanted to have a week, a normal, week job.
He made it terribly clear to the rest of us.
Some of us have got homes to go to.
No, it was quite tiring.
Another
I mean,
sorry, how long is this
no.
stammer going to take?
Unfortunately, we had a sort of anti-chemistry, him and me, because whenever he looked at me, on camera, which was, whenever I was on camera, I looked quite supportive, but whenever he looked at me for support when I was off, I was just like, apparently, I was always looking at my temperature. I mean, my thingy, yawning.
Took my own children
I took my children and said, I don't give up. Yeah, the witch job. But no, I was doing both at the same time. But I did think it was quite good for me to try and be, slightly less mad and screamy and externalised, and play somebody who's slightly more nuanced and internal and maybe just more subtle. I haven't done subtle for ages. Red Queen wasn't subtle. It was just like, okay, let's try and be subtle and maybe real. Real sometimes is quite good when it comes to acting. So, yeah.
And there was a suggestion, despite her sort of slightly airy sort of quality, that there was a spine there somewhere.
Oh, a huge spine.
Underneath it. Could you say something about that?
Well, I think everyone, it's quite, he had the easy job because no one recognised him. No one knows what George the What's-it looks like, and but everyone knows what the Queen Mum looks like, and you always think, oh, fluffy and all sort of charming and vague, and in her latter years, at least, and I thought, well, I didn't have long, rather like Claire, we didn't have long, and the thing is, when you play the Queen Mother, you have to...
self-imposed.
I know, self-imposed, because I kept on saying no, and then flop. Then I suddenly realised I was having a costume fitting. I thought I better learn about this woman. Anyway, every biography is immensely thick, because she lasted so long. So, I thought, this is not...
You feel like you resent that.
Well, yeah, when you're doing a bio thing, and I like, as Colin would testify...
Like to play 3-year-olds, because
Well, I did. Red Queen, 2-year-old, that's what and then I thought, oh, God. Anyway, luckily I only had to get to 1939, so I read the first 3 inches of William Shawcross's novel. It gave me absolutely no insight to her character whatsoever. And then Hugo Vickers, who's the unauthorised biographer, he came, and I said, come on, give us the dirt, give us the dirt. This is me dressed as a witch in my caravan. And he said, well, he gave me this thing, which I know the others are so, they know. What did I say? Do you remember?
What did you say?
No, the quote, Cecil Beaton said...
Oh, it was a marshmallow?
Yeah, she was a marshmallow, but made by a welding machine.
Yeah.
And it was that double layer that I thought, she was an expert, in my eyes, on what I gathered, and what I tried to distill from all the information I was getting was, I thought she was an expert figure, expert public figure, as expert as he wasn't, and that she had this whole armour, which was all fluff and lovely and demure, and she had the whole neck crick, which was not good for my neck, but underneath she was immensely robust and strong and very powerful, and probably the more dominant in the relationship, but helpfully